McLaren and Aston Martin have been the biggest shocks of the season. Watching the 7th place finisher in the 2022 Constructors Championship snag 6 podiums in 8 races at the start of the season was wild. Then as Aston Martin started to drop off, McLaren came storming through the midfield and now have the second fastest car on the grid. They're battling for places in the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship this weekend, and the results in Qatar are pivotal to where they both finish this season. The question is though, can McLaren make Aston Martin's season even worse? Let's check it out. With 6 races left in the season, the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships are both decided. Max Verstappen and Red Bull have completely dominated both competitions and will enjoy the spoils at Losail, where Max lifts the Drivers' Championship for a 3rd year in a row. But behind them, there is still a lot to play for. Just 20 points separate Mercedes and Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. Anyone from 8th place George Russell to 2nd place Sergio Perez is unsafe in their position in the drivers' standings. But it is probably McLaren who have the power to upset the championship the most. They sit 5th in the Constructors' Championship on 172 points, while Aston Martin sit 4th on 221. 49 points might seem like a lot with only 6 races left, but if McLaren bag a few more double podiums, then it will be an easy gap to close. In the Drivers' Championship, Lando Norris has 115 points in 7th place, and Fernando Alonso sits 4th on 174. Again, a big gap by the looks of it, but having looked at the data, Alonso is far from safe. Can Norris put in the performances to reel him in though? We'll answer that question later, but first let's check out that Constructors' Championship battle. Lando Norris reckons McLaren can beat Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship this year. The team's double podium finish at the Japanese Grand Prix drastically reduced the gap between the two teams. The two teams' fortunes have changed drastically since the season started. Aston Martin scored a podium finish in the first race and sat 2nd in the standings, while McLaren was last. By round 3, McLaren jumped up to 5th in the standings with their first points of the year, but the two teams were still separated by 53 points. By the Austrian Grand Prix, the 9th round of 2023, that had grown to 146. But that weekend was a watershed moment for McLaren, whose performance was transformed by their first major upgrade of the season. Aston Martin have found it increasingly difficult to reach the podium and have begun to slide down the standings. After 16 of 22 rounds, McLaren are now chasing Aston Martin in 4th place in the Constructors' Championship and is 49 points behind. They have more than halved their deficit in the last 2 race weekends. After learning how much McLaren had gained on their rivals after the race in Japan, Norris believes they can overhaul Aston Martin. "I didn't think it was that close," he said. "But yeah, if it's 49, then I definitely think so," he said. McLaren needs to outscore Aston Martin by 8.2 points per round to move ahead. That job will be made easier as 3 of the remaining rounds feature sprint races, meaning teams can score a maximum of 59 points instead of 44. Norris expects McLaren can outscore Aston Martin more often than not over the final rounds. "There's not many races left," he said. "I'm sure there's going to be a couple where Aston are going to be a bit stronger, but I think our advantage at the minute, comparing to almost every team bar a couple, is we have 2 drivers who are up there fighting for these positions and fighting for points. Not every team has that at the minute, so I think that's helping us." That thinly veiled shot at Aston Martin and Mercedes is a very good point. McLaren's rivals both have a driver that is struggling. McLaren's points haul is divided more evenly between its 2 drivers than Aston Martin's. Norris has 115 points to Oscar Piastri's 57. Both have fewer points than Aston Martin's top scorer Fernando Alonso on 174, but more than his teammate Lance Stroll with 47. Piastri has been behind on upgrades as well, but with both cars running the same spec now, and Lance Stroll without a score in 4 races, McLaren are in prime position to demolish Aston Martin's lead in the next 6 races. Not that Aston Martin is intending to just give it up. Team principal Mike Crack said the objective is at least 4th in the standings now. "We are currently 4th in both championships, and we should not forget we have had some amazing results and 7 podiums this year. With every race we continue to learn and grow together as a team. We are in a fierce battle with some exceptional competitors, but we'll not go down without a fight," said Crack. Aston Martin won't go down without a fight, but do they really have the tools to fight Lando Norris? 4 podiums in the last 8 races highlights the turnaround in form from McLaren, when you consider that Lando finished outside of the points in 5 of the first 8 races. It isn't like he was just missing out either. 4 of those pointless finishes were 17th places. If it was one race that far back, you could blame the track, but 4 finishes in 17th place is a sign of an awful car. After round 8, the Canadian Grand Prix, Lando Norris sat on 12 points while Fernando Alonso was flying high on 117 points. Since then, Alonso has added 57 points to his tally, and Norris has added 103, almost doubling Alonso's points return. If it hadn't been for that wild Dutch Grand Prix that suited the Aston Martin, and where McLaren got their strategy all wrong, the difference would be even greater. With 6 races left, Lando is 59 points behind Alonso. Is that too big a gap to close though? Over the last 8 races, Lando has averaged 12.875 points a race to Alonso's 7.125. If they carry on at that rate for the last 6 races, Lando will score another 77 points to Alonso's 43. That means Norris will be 25 points behind Alonso. There are 3 sprint races during the final 6 rounds though. Alonso's average finishing position in the last 8 races was 7.5, and Norris's was 4.25. So let's say Norris manages 4th in each sprint and Alonso comes 7th in 2 and 8th in the other. That bags Lando 20 points to Alonso's 5. That brings the gap at the end of the season between the two of them to 10 points. 10 points is nothing in Formula 1. If Alonso fails to score in one race, dropping his 7.125 points on average, that is basically the difference. If Lando can avoid any more finishes outside of the top 5, which is definitely possible, then that will cover the difference as well. After 8 rounds of the season, over 100 points separated the two drivers. To have turned that around is an incredible triumph for both McLaren and Lando Norris. Their development this season has been unlike anything we've seen during a season in Formula 1. Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso are about to be bulldozed, and honestly, there's probably nothing they can do about it. Qatar will make Aston Martin's position even worse as well. Andrea Stella has suggested the upgraded McLaren MCL60 will be well suited to the Losail circuit. McLaren heads to Qatar off the back of its best performance since the 2021 Italian Grand Prix, after picking up a double podium in Suzuka 2 weekends ago. That performance came off the back of McLaren introducing another round of upgrades after the Singapore Grand Prix, which offered their full impact around the fast Suzuka circuit. With Losail also featuring predominantly medium and high-speed corners, team principal Stella is optimistic. There's a variability of tracks left in the season, but none of these tracks has the Singapore characteristics, he reasoned when asked if McLaren can catch Red Bull this year. So while there could be some tracks in which we could be competitive, I think Qatar could be a decent track for us. I'm afraid that the characteristics we like, they are also the characteristics where Red Bull will be just outstanding. So we'll have to be realistic that we need some situations, let's say, to happen to be able to make the final step. While McLaren's incredible development should be applauded, and they do look the likeliest to take a race win off Red Bull over the remaining 6 rounds, Aston Martin's failures should not be ignored. Fernando Alonso looked to have the potential to be a serious championship contender at the start of the season, assuming the development went in the right direction, but the team just hasn't improved at all. Aston's performance director, Tom McCullough, admitted the team has not developed as strongly as hoped, and that rival teams who started the season on the back foot have done a better job of catching up. From a pure development race, bringing bits to the car, making the car quicker, it was a relative game. Some teams have been doing a stronger job than we have to accept that. We obviously hope to develop stronger than we've ended up developing. Aston Martin have some serious work to do this winter if they want to improve on what has been a shockingly bad year. To fall from out-and-out second fastest on the grid to 5th fastest at best is an appalling display of development, and McLaren and Lando Norris are poised to demolish Aston's crumbling performance. Do you think Lando will catch Alonso? And what needs to change at Aston Martin to ensure they don't repeat this season next year? Let me know in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.